The watercolor brush trembled in Maya Chen's fingers as her mother's voice cut through the Sunday afternoon air like a blade through silk. What are you going to stop playing with those silly paintings and get a real job? The question hung in the pristine living room of her parents' suburban home, suspended between the ticking of an ornate grandfather clock and the gentle hum of central air conditioning that her father had upgraded just last month, another reminder of the financial security that seemed to perpetually elude their youngest daughter. If you're enjoying this story about Maya's incredible secret, please take just 30 seconds to hit that like button and share it with someone who loves surprising plot twists. Your engagement helps me bring you more amazing stories like this one. Maya tightened her grip on the brush, cerulean blue bleeding into her mountain landscape. The worn art supplies were perfect camouflage, disguising a woman who owned more real estate than her entire family combined. Maya's 28 years old, her older brother Derek chimed in from his position on the leather sectional, his voice carrying that particular tone of condescending concern that siblings master so well. Most people her age are buying houses, starting families, building something real. He gestured vaguely toward her painting, drops of afternoon sunlight catching the wedding ring that symbolized everything Maya was supposedly missing. Instead, she's still living in that tiny apartment, spending money on art supplies. The irony cut deep. Derek's house had cost him $340,000 with a 30-year mortgage. Maya owned 4 identical houses, each generating more monthly rental income than Derek's entire salary. Your cousin Linda just became a partner at her law firm. She bought a beautiful condo downtown. Corner unit, floor-to-ceiling windows, granite countertops. Patricia's eyes found Maya's worn jeans and paint-stained cardigan, conducting a visual inventory of perceived failure. She's building equity, honey. Real wealth. Maya dipped her brush into clean water, watching the blue dissolve into cloudy swirls. Linda's corner condo was lovely. Maya had toured the building 6 months ago when she'd purchased the penthouse 3 floors up. The granite countertops were indeed beautiful, though Maya preferred the marbles she had selected for her own unit. But Linda didn't know that her successful artist cousin owned the building she lived in, just as Patricia didn't know that the broke artist she was lecturing had an investment portfolio that would make most financial advisors weep with envy. Remember when Maya wanted to go to art school? Maya's older brother Derek chimed in from his position on the leather sectional, his voice carrying that particular tone of condescending concern that siblings master so well. Remember when Maya wanted to go to art school? We all thought it was just a phase. College experimentation. She laughed, the sound bright and cutting. But here we are, 6 years later, and she's still playing pretend. I worry about her future, Maya's mother continued, settling into her favorite armchair with the weight of maternal concern. What happens when she gets older? When she can't afford health insurance or needs to retire? Artists don't get pension plans. Her voice softened slightly, the sharp edges of criticism smoothed by genuine love and fear. I just want her to be secure, to have options. Maya's father, who had remained quietly focused on his newspaper until now, folded it with deliberate precision and looked up. Your mother's right, sweetheart. We're not getting any younger, and we won't always be here to help if things get tough. Maybe it's time to think about using that art degree to teach. Steady income, benefits, summers off. The suggestion of teaching wasn't new. It emerged at every family gathering like a well-rehearsed chorus. Maya had nothing against teaching. In fact, she deeply respected educators and understood the vital role they played in society. But the suggestion always came wrapped in the assumption that her art wasn't valuable enough to sustain her, that it was something to be set aside in favor of real work. They couldn't know that she'd actually considered purchasing the small private school where she guest lectured last year, not to work there, but to ensure its arts program remained fully funded. Look at your sister, Derek added, nodding toward the family photos that lined the mantelpieces. Sarah's got a good government job, benefits, a retirement plan. She bought her house at 25. He paused, letting the comparison sink in. She's building something lasting.
Maya mixed a darker shade of blue on her palette, the bristles of her brush gathering pigment that would soon become the shadow of a distant peak. Sarah's government position was indeed stable and respectable, with excellent benefits and job security that many people envied. Her house was charming and well-maintained, a source of pride that she shared frequently on social media. What Sarah didn't know was that her younger sister had quietly paid off her mortgage 3 months ago, purchasing the loan from the bank and restructuring it as a gift that would remain anonymous until the day Maya decided to reveal the truth. The room fell into a familiar rhythm of concerned murmurs and pointed suggestions. Maya had heard it all before. The community college that needed art instructors, the graphic design firms that were always hiring, the marketing companies that valued creative minds. Each suggestion came with the unspoken message that her chosen path was unsustainable, that her dreams were luxuries she couldn't afford. They spoke about her financial struggles as if she were seated in another room, analyzing her choices with the clinical detachment of doctors discussing a patient's prognosis. "I just don't understand the mindset," Patricia continued, her voice gaining momentum like a train leaving the station. "When I was her age, I was focused on building a career, establishing myself. This whole follow your passion thing is a luxury for people who have safety nets." She gestured broadly, encompassing the comfortable suburban home, the family photos, the evidence of middle-class stability. "Maya's smart, she's educated, she could be successful at anything she put her mind to, but instead she's choosing to struggle." The word choosing struck Maya as particularly ironic. She had indeed chosen her path, but not in the way her family understood. Every decision had been calculated, every risk measured against potential returns. The tiny apartment they worried about was a deliberate choice, a small, efficient space in a trendy neighborhood that required minimal maintenance and left her free to travel between her various properties. The secondhand clothes and careful budgeting weren't signs of financial distress, but evidence of a woman who understood that wealth building required discipline and patience. Maya cleaned her brush again, watching the pigment swirl away down the drain of perception and assumption. She could end this conversation with a single phone call to her accountant, could silence every concern with a brief tour of her portfolio. But she'd learned long ago that money changed relationships in ways that couldn't be undone. The moment her family knew the truth, she would stop being Maya, the struggling artist, and become Maya, the wealthy property owner. Every interaction would be filtered through that knowledge, every conversation tinged with questions about loans, investments, and financial advice. "Maybe we should stage an intervention," Jennifer suggested, with a laugh that didn't quite hide the seriousness beneath it. "Lock her in a room with some job applications and don't let her out until she submits a few resumes." The comment drew chuckles from around the room, but Maya heard the underlying frustration, the sense that they were watching someone they love make terrible decisions without the power to stop them. "I've been looking at positions online." Derek's voice took on the tone of someone presenting a solution to an ongoing problem. "There's an art therapy program at the hospital where Jennifer works. It's part-time, but it's a start. Real patients, real impact, steady paycheck." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through saved links with the efficiency of someone who had clearly researched this topic extensively. Maya could keep painting on the side, but she'd have something stable to fall back on. The kindness in his voice was almost harder to bear than the criticism. Maya knew her brother loved her, knew that his suggestions came from a place of genuine concern and affection. He stayed awake at night worrying about her future, probably discussing her situation with Jennifer in the quiet moments before sleep, trying to devise ways to help a sister who seemed determined to make life harder for herself. The fact that she could have bought the hospital where Jennifer worked, could have endowed the art therapy program for the next century, was a secret that felt heavier with each passing day.
Maya stepped back from her painting, studying the mountain landscape that had evolved during the course of the conversation. The peaks rose against a sky that shifted from blue to purple, their snow-covered summits catching light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was the kind of scene that tourists paid hundreds of dollars to experience, the kind of view that increased property values and drew investors from around the world. Maya owned 7 properties with similar views,
each one carefully selected for its natural beauty and investment potential. "The painting's beautiful, honey," her mother said softly, approaching the easel with the careful steps of someone trying to bridge a growing gap. "You have real talent. No one's questioning that." She reached out as if to touch Maya's shoulder, then pulled her hand back, uncertain of her welcome. "We just want you to have security, to know that you'll be okay no matter what happens." The love in her mother's voice was unmistakable, and Maya felt the familiar tug of longing to share the truth, to ease the worry that kept her parents awake at night. But she also knew that revelation would bring its own complications. They would want to know how she'd managed to accumulate such wealth, would demand explanations for the years of deception, would struggle to reconcile the daughter they thought they knew with the woman she actually was. "You know what I think?" Maya said finally, her voice steady despite the emotional undercurrent of the afternoon. "I think sometimes the things that look like struggles from the outside are actually investments in something bigger." She gestured toward the painting, toward the mountains that seemed to glow with inner light. "Sometimes what looks like failure is actually patience." The room fell quiet, family members exchanging glances that spoke volumes about their shared concern and confusion. They heard her words as the rationalization of someone unwilling to face reality, another example of the dreamy impracticality that had defined Maya's choices for as long as they could remember. They couldn't know that she was speaking literally, that every year of a parent's struggle had been a calculated step toward financial independence that exceeded their wildest dreams. As Maya packed her art supplies into the worn canvas bag, she caught her reflection in the dining room mirror. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to look like. A struggling artist in paint-stained clothes, carrying the tools of an impractical trade. The performance was flawless, honed by years of practice and necessity. But behind her eyes, in spaces her family couldn't see, lived the quiet confidence of a woman who had built an empire, one careful investment at a time. The Sunday afternoon light was beginning to fade as Maya prepared to return to her small apartment, to the life her family believed was evidence of poor choices and misplaced priorities. Tomorrow, she would review rental reports from her property management company, would consider offers on 2 new acquisitions, would continue building wealth in silence while maintaining the fiction that kept her relationships intact. She was a broke artist and a secret millionaire, a failure and a success, a daughter who worried her family, and a woman who had exceeded every measure of achievement they valued. The contradiction didn't trouble her anymore. Like her paintings, it had layers of meaning that revealed themselves slowly, to those patient enough to look beyond the surface. And Maya Chen had learned to be very patient indeed. The silence in Maya's one-bedroom apartment felt different after Sunday dinner, heavier, more purposeful, like the quiet that settles over a theater after the curtain falls. She set her canvas bag down by the door with deliberate care, the same way she'd been setting it down for 3 years, maintaining the choreography of a life that existed only for show. The late afternoon light filtered through sheer curtains that she had bought at a discount store, casting familiar shadows across furniture that told the story her family expected to see. A struggling artist making do with secondhand pieces and creative resourcefulness. Maya moved through her small space with practiced efficiency, every step a reminder of the elaborate performance she'd constructed around her existence. The apartment was genuinely tiny, 480 square feet of carefully curated authenticity that served as both home and stage set. She'd chosen it specifically for its limitations, understanding that believable poverty required genuine sacrifice. The narrow galley kitchen, the Murphy bed that folded into the wall, the single closet that could barely contain her deliberately modest wardrobe, all of it designed to support the narrative that kept her real life hidden from view. But as she settled into the worn armchair that faced her easel, she felt the weight of her double existence settling around her shoulders like a familiar but increasingly uncomfortable coat. The chair cost $12 at a thrift store in Queens, a purchase she had made while wearing the same paint-stained jeans she'd worn to dinner, playing the role so completely that the cashier offered her a student discount without being asked.
That same day,
She closed on a $3.2 million brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, signing papers with hands that still bore traces of acrylic paint, her signature worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. The contradiction had become her constant companion, following her through days that split cleanly in half like a magic trick performed in reverse. Morning Maya checked rental income reports and reviewed property management updates, her laptop screen filled with numbers that would make her family's concerns about her financial stability seem like worried whispers in a hurricane. Evening Maya scraped paint from her fingernails and calculated whether she could afford premium coffee this week, performing poverty with the dedication of a method actor who'd forgotten where the character ended and the person began. She opened her laptop now, the familiar blue glow illuminating her face as she navigated to the secure portal that connected her to an empire built in silence and shadows. 27 unread messages from her property management team painted a picture of success that felt increasingly surreal against the backdrop of her afternoon with family. The luxury condo in Miami had new tenants, a tech entrepreneur and his wife who'd signed a 2-year lease at $8,500 per month. The mountain cabin in Colorado needed a new roof, estimated cost $23,000, approved with a single click. The Victorian duplex in San Francisco had a waiting list of potential renters willing to pay premium prices for the privilege of living in a space Maya had restored with meticulous attention to historical accuracy. Each property represented a different version of herself, a different life she might have lived if she'd made conventional choices. The penthouse in Chicago reflected her taste for modern minimalism, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city like a living photograph. The farmhouse in Vermont spoke to some deeper longing for simplicity and connection to the land, its organic garden and restored barn offering an escape she visited whenever the weight of her double life became too heavy to bear. The beach house in California embodied pure joy, its bright colors and ocean views designed for the kind of carefree happiness that seemed increasingly elusive in her carefully constructed existence. Maya scrolled through photos from the monthly property inspections, each image a window into lives she couldn't fully claim. Her tenants lived openly in spaces she'd created, their children playing in gardens she'd designed, their friends gathering in living rooms where she'd selected every piece of furniture. They hosted dinner parties in dining rooms where her taste and vision had shaped every detail. But she would always be a stranger in those spaces, the invisible owner, who existed only as a name on legal documents and rent checks. The weight of secrecy had been manageable in the beginning, when her portfolio consisted of a single rental property and the stakes felt lower. But as her investments multiplied and her wealth accumulated, the distance between her public and private selves had grown into a chasm that sometimes felt impossible to bridge. She'd become a prisoner of her own success, trapped by the very achievements that should have set her free. Her phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Found another job listing for art therapists. Hospital work, good benefits, think about it. The message came with a screenshot of a job posting that offered $45,000 annually, plus health insurance, retirement contributions, and the kind of stability that kept people like her brother sleeping soundly at night. Maya stared at the salary figure, less than what she earned in rental income during a typical month, and felt a familiar mixture of affection and frustration wash over her. Derek's concern was genuine and his intentions pure, but his solutions felt like band-aids offered to someone who'd already learned to perform surgery on herself. She typed back, "Thanks, I'll take a look," because it was easier than explaining that she'd already donated more than that salary to arts programs in underserved schools, that she'd quietly funded scholarships for aspiring artists who couldn't afford supplies, that her struggling artist persona was generating more positive impact than any traditional job could offer. Maya closed her laptop and moved to the small kitchen, where she began preparing the kind of simple dinner that fit her public narrative. Pasta with marinara sauce from a jar, a side salad made from vegetables that were approaching their expiration date, water instead of wine.
Not much longer, Marcus promised, holding her close and trying to believe that their luck had finally changed. Daddy's going to build you the best bedroom any little girl ever had. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep to the sound of natural gas still venting safely from their accidental discovery, Marcus and Sarah sat by their campfire discussing a future that had been transformed in the space of a single morning. I know this story might seem too incredible to believe, but sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. If you're invested in finding out how this family's incredible journey ends, please share this story with someone who needs to hear that miracles can happen to ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. The phone calls started the next day. Energy company representatives who'd heard about their discovery through the industry grapevine and wanted to schedule meetings to discuss lease agreements. Jake had apparently been busy since their morning conference, spreading word about the Chen family's accidental windfall to contacts throughout the regional energy business. The first meeting was with representatives from Appalachian Energy Corporation, a mid-sized company that specialized in developing natural gas reserves in rural areas. They arrived at the property in a convoy of SUVs that looked out of place navigating the rutted access road, and Marcus found himself apologizing for their accommodations while serving coffee around a campfire to executives wearing suits that probably cost more than his monthly construction salary had been. David Riley, the regional development manager, was a soft-spoken man in his 40s who seemed genuinely impressed by both the discovery and the circumstances that had led to it. "In 30 years in this business, I've never seen anything quite like this," he said, studying the temporary cap Jake had installed over their well. "Usually we're dealing with farmers who've known for generations that they had gas on their property, or energy companies that have spent millions on geological surveys. The idea of accidentally discovering a reserve of this magnitude while drilling for household water, it's like something out of a movie." The offer from Appalachian Energy was straightforward: $8 million upfront, plus 12% royalties on all gas extracted from the property. The contract would run for 20 years with options for renewal and would include provisions for additional bonus payments if the reserve proved larger than current estimates. $8 million, Sarah repeated, like she was testing how the words sounded. "That's real money? In our bank account?" "Minus taxes and legal fees, yes," Riley confirmed. "We could have the paperwork completed and the signing bonus transferred within 3 weeks. 3 weeks. More than enough time to satisfy Janet Holbrook's demands, more than enough time to build Emma a house that would make their current camping situation look like a distant memory. But Marcus had learned enough about construction and contracts to know that the first offer was rarely the best offer, and Jake had prepared him for the negotiation process. "We appreciate the offer," Marcus said, trying to sound more confident than he felt, "but we'd like to hear from the other companies that have expressed interest before we make any decisions." The meeting with Titan Gas Corporation the following day was a different experience entirely. Their representatives arrived with geological surveys and seismic equipment, conducting their own tests of the gas flow and pressure readings before discussing any financial arrangements. Rebecca Martinez, Titan's acquisitions director, was a sharp-eyed woman who clearly knew more about Marcus's financial situation than he was comfortable with. She said, "We understand you're facing some time pressures. We also understand that this discovery represents a life-changing opportunity for your family. Titan specializes in working with individual landowners who find themselves in exactly your situation."
Maya stared out her window at the ordinary lives unfolding in the apartments across the way, weighing her words carefully. I mean, maybe success isn't always visible from the outside. Maybe sometimes the most important victories are the quiet ones. Sarah sighed, a sound that carried years of worry and frustration. "Maya, you're talking in riddles again. I just want to know that you're going to be okay." "I'm going to be more than okay," Maya said, and for once she allowed complete honesty to color her voice. "I promise you that." After they hung up, Maya sat in her small living space as darkness settled over the city. The sounds of evening drifted through her thin walls, neighbors coming home from work, televisions turning on, the ordinary rhythms of lives lived without disguise or deception. She'd built something extraordinary in the shadows, had achieved a level of financial independence that most people could only dream about. But the cost of that achievement was measured not just in dollars and sacrifice, but in the distance it had created between her and the people she loved most. Maya opened her laptop again, not to check property reports or investment returns, but to begin sketching out an idea that had been growing in her mind for months. It was time to start planning an exit strategy from her double life, a way to bridge the gap between who she appeared to be and who she actually was. The process would be delicate, requiring the same careful attention to detail that had built her empire in the first place. But as she began to type, Maya realized that the most difficult part wouldn't be revealing her success, it would be helping her family understand why she'd hidden it for so long. The reasons that had seemed so clear and necessary in the beginning now felt tangled and complex, a web of protection and performance that had taken on a life of its own. The woman who owned 12 properties worth $45 million sat in her tiny apartment surrounded by the evidence of a life that existed only for show and began planning the most important revelation of her carefully constructed existence. Outside her window, the city hummed with the energy of millions of people living their authentic lives, and Maya Chen prepared to join them. The crisis began on a Tuesday morning in October, when Maya's carefully constructed world started to unravel with the devastating precision of a controlled demolition. She was reviewing quarterly reports from her property management company, her laptop balanced on the narrow kitchen counter of her tiny apartment, when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize but instinctively feared. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Margaret Rodriguez from St. Mary's Hospital, and her words cut through Maya's morning routine like shards of glass through silk. "Miss Chen, I'm calling about your father. He's been admitted to the cardiac unit following what appears to be a moderate heart attack. He's stable now, but we need to discuss treatment options and..." The doctor's voice continued, professional and measured, but Maya heard only fragments through the roaring in her ears. Her father, who had worked 43 years at the same manufacturing plant, who had never missed a day of work, who had built his entire identity around providing for his family, was lying in a hospital bed while she sat surrounded by financial reports that proved she could solve any problem money could touch. Maya closed her laptop with trembling fingers, her quarterly rental income of $287,000 suddenly feeling like evidence of a crime she couldn't confess to committing. This story is about to take an incredible turn. But first, if you're hooked on Maya's dilemma, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It takes zero effort, but helps me create more captivating content for you. The woman who owned 12 properties worth $45 million was about to risk everything that mattered to save the people who had unknowingly inspired her success. She threw on clothes without thinking, the same paint-stained jeans and faded sweater that had become her uniform of artificial struggle, and called a rideshare to the hospital. During the 20-minute drive through morning traffic, she stared out the window at a city she owned pieces of, buildings that generated income while she rode in the backseat of someone else's car because owning a vehicle would have disrupted her carefully maintained image of financial hardship. The cardiac unit at St. Mary's smelled of antiseptic and worry, fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on faces marked by fear and exhaustion. Maya found her family clustered in the waiting area, her mother clutching a tissue box like a lifeline, Derek pacing with the restless energy of someone who needed to fix things but didn't know how, Sarah on her phone trying to navigate insurance coverage and medical leave policies. They looked up when Maya arrived, and she saw her own terror reflected in their eyes, mixed with something else, a kind of resigned acceptance that in this crisis, like all crises, Maya would be more burden than help. "The doctor says he needs surgery," her mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something called an angioplasty and maybe stents. The insurance will cover most of it, but there's still..." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence that everyone understood. Medical bills, even with insurance, could devastate a family living paycheck to paycheck. Recovery time would mean missed work, reduced income, the kind of financial stress that could turn a health crisis into a complete life collapse. Derek stopped pacing and sat heavily in the plastic chair beside Maya.
"I've been looking at the numbers," he said, his voice carrying the flat exhaustion of someone who had already calculated every possible solution and found them all inadequate. Between the deductibles, the copays, the time Dad will need off work, we're looking at maybe $40,000 out of pocket. Maybe more if there are complications. Maya felt each word like a physical blow. $40,000. Less than 2 months of rental income from her Chicago penthouse alone. She could write a check right now. Could solve this problem with a phone call to her financial advisor. Could ensure that her father received the best possible care without her family experiencing a moment of financial stress. But doing so would require explanations she wasn't prepared to give. Revelations that would shatter relationships already strained by years of deception. "We'll figure it out," Sarah said with forced optimism, her phone still pressed to her ear as she navigated the labyrinthian bureaucracy of medical billing. "I can take out a loan against my 401k. Derek can do a home equity line of credit. We'll make it work." She was already sacrificing her own financial security, already calculating how much of her future she was willing to mortgage to pay for her father's present crisis. Maya watched her siblings transform into problem solvers, their love for their father expressed through spreadsheets and loan applications, through sacrifices that would echo through their lives for years to come. Derek would leverage his house, the house Maya could have bought outright with the profits from any single property sale. Sarah would raid her retirement savings that Maya could replace with a fraction of her liquid assets. They were preparing to impoverish themselves to save their father, while she sat among them disguised as someone who couldn't help, someone who would be just another mouth to feed if the crisis deepened. The next several hours passed in a blur of medical consultations and financial calculations. Maya's father was wheeled into surgery while the family huddled in the waiting room, their conversations alternating between worry about his health and panic about the mounting costs. Maya contributed what she could to the medical discussions, asking questions about treatment options, researching second opinions online. But when the conversation turned to money, she fell silent, trapped by the prison of her own deception. "Maybe we should start a GoFundMe," Jennifer suggested during one particularly desperate brainstorming session. "People do that for medical emergencies. The community might help." Maya's sister-in-law was grasping at straws, looking for solutions in crowdsourcing and charity because the family's own resources were so limited that her husband might lose his house and her sister-in-law might lose her retirement to pay for necessary medical care. Maya excused herself to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror, staring at a woman who owned more wealth than everyone in that waiting room combined, but couldn't access it without destroying every relationship that mattered to her. She pulled out her phone and called her financial advisor, a conversation that took place in whispers between bathroom stalls. "I need to liquidate some assets quickly. Maybe sell one of the smaller properties, something that can close fast." Even as she spoke, Maya knew she was only treating symptoms. The real problem wasn't money. It was the elaborate lies she'd built around her life, the fiction that kept her family struggling while she accumulated wealth in secret. But Marcus, her advisor, raised complications she hadn't considered. "Maya, your properties are all held in trusts and LLCs for tax purposes. Liquidating quickly would trigger significant penalties, and more importantly, it would create a paper trail. If your family starts asking questions about where $40,000 came from..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Maya had built her financial empire using sophisticated legal structures designed to maximize returns and minimize tax liability. But those same structures made it almost impossible to access funds quickly without leaving evidence.
Maya returned to the waiting room to find her family deep in conversation with a hospital financial counselor, a kind woman who was explaining payment plan options with the gentle efficiency of someone who had delivered similar news countless times before. "We can structure the payments over 3 years," the counselor was saying, "which would bring your monthly obligation down to around $1,200 plus interest. $1,200 a month for 3 years. Money that would come from Derek's already tight budget, from Sarah's reduced retirement contributions, from their parents' modest savings. Maya calculated the total cost in her head. Over $40,000 that her family didn't have, spread across years of financial stress that could have been eliminated with a single wire transfer she couldn't make without revealing everything. That evening, after her father's successful surgery and the family's collective sigh of relief, Maya sat in her tiny apartment staring at bank statements that showed her monthly rental income was more than most people's annual salaries. The moral weight of her deception had never felt heavier. She'd built her wealth partly by being frugal with her own lifestyle, but now her frugality was costing her family their financial stability. The money she'd saved by eating ramen noodles and wearing thrift store clothes could save her father's health and her siblings' financial futures, but accessing it would require confessing to years of elaborate deception. Maya opened her laptop and began typing an email to her family, then deleted it, started a text message, then erased it, picked up her phone to call Sarah, then set it down. Every approach to revelation felt wrong, tainted by the timing that made it look like she'd been withholding help during a crisis, like she'd been playing games with their father's health. The next morning brought fresh complications. Derek arrived at Maya's apartment at 7 a.m., looking like he hadn't slept, carrying coffee and the kind of desperate energy that precedes difficult conversations. "I've been thinking all night," he said, settling onto her small couch with the careful movements of someone carrying an enormous burden. "About the money situation, about Dad, about all of it." Maya felt her stomach clench, wondering if somehow her brother had discovered her secret, if the crisis had triggered investigations that would expose everything. But Derek's next words revealed a different kind of desperation entirely. "I want you to move in with Jennifer and me. Temporarily, just until Dad gets back on his feet and we figure out the medical bills. You could save on rent, maybe help with some household expenses, and we could pool our resources to handle the crisis." His voice carried the forced cheerfulness of someone proposing a solution that benefited no one but seemed necessary anyway. Maya stared at her brother, understanding the full implications of his offer. He was proposing to take in his struggling artist sister, to provide her with housing and support, to add her needs to his already overwhelming financial obligations. In Derek's mind, this was family solidarity, everyone sacrificing to get through the crisis together. He didn't know that his offer would actually cost Maya thousands of dollars in lost rental income from the apartment she'd been subletting to maintain her cover story, that she'd be subsidizing her own charity case. Maya opened her laptop and began typing an email to her family, then deleted it, started a text message, then erased it, picked up her phone to call Sarah, then set it down. Every approach to revelation felt wrong, tainted by the timing that made it look like she'd been withholding help during a crisis, like she'd been playing games with their father's health. The next morning brought fresh complications. Derek arrived at Maya's apartment at 7 a.m., looking like he hadn't slept, carrying coffee and the kind of desperate energy that precedes difficult conversations. "I've been thinking all night," he said, settling onto her small couch with the careful movements of someone carrying an enormous burden. "About the money situation, about Dad, about all of it." Maya felt his stomach clench, wondering if somehow her brother had discovered her secret, if the crisis had triggered investigations that would expose everything. But Derek's next words revealed a different kind of desperation entirely. "I want you to move in with Jennifer and me. Temporarily, just until Dad gets back on his feet and we figure out the medical bills. You could save on rent, maybe help with some household expenses, and we could pool our resources to handle the crisis." His voice carried the forced cheerfulness of someone proposing a solution that benefited no one but seemed necessary anyway. Maya stared at her brother, understanding the full implications of his offer. He was proposing to take in his struggling artist sister, to provide her with housing and support, to add her needs to his already overwhelming financial obligations. In Derek's mind, this was family solidarity, everyone sacrificing to get through the crisis together. He didn't know that his offer would actually cost Maya thousands of dollars in lost rental income from the apartment she'd been subletting to maintain her cover story, that she'd be subsidizing her own charity case.
Maya, Derek, I can't ask you to do that, Maya said carefully. You've got enough to worry about without taking on another mouth to feed. That's what family does, Derek replied with the simple conviction of someone who had never questioned the fundamental assumptions of his life. We take care of each other. And honestly, Maya, this might be good for you too. Living with us might help you get some perspective on the whole art thing, maybe motivate you to look for something more stable. There it was, the underlying agenda that transformed Derek's generosity into something more complex. He wasn't just offering help, he was proposing intervention, a chance to guide his misguided sister toward better choices while solving the family's immediate crisis. Maya would become a project, a fixer-upper housed in her brother's spare room while he worked to reshape her priorities and ambitions. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her property manager. Miami condo lease renewal came in at $9,200 a month. Tenants are requesting smart home upgrades. Should I approve the $15K installation? She stared at the message while Derek continued explaining his plans for their shared living arrangement. The cognitive dissonance so complete it felt like existing in two different realities simultaneously. The conversation was interrupted by a call from their mother. "The social worker wants to meet with all of us this afternoon," she said, her voice tight with stress. "Something about discharge planning and home care. Your father's going to need help for the next few weeks, maybe longer."
Frank's generosity extended beyond shelter. He proposed a partnership, help him dig a well on his property, and he'd help Marcus drill one on theirs. This collaboration would provide Marcus with crucial experience while splitting drilling costs between the two families. Danny Kowalski, Frank's drilling contractor friend, arrived with equipment that could punch through 60 feet of mountain soil and rock. For 2 days, the rhythmic percussion of the drill bit echoed across the mountainside as they worked toward Frank's water table at 42 feet, celebrating when clear, cold mountain water bubbled up from the depths. When drilling began on Marcus's property, everything proceeded normally until the 3rd day, when Danny's drill bit punched through clay at 45 feet and hit something unexpected. The rig shuddered violently, pressure gauges spiked, and a strange industrial smell filled the air. "Natural gas," Danny announced with amazement and concern. "Jesus Christ, Marcus, you've hit a gas pocket, a big one." The immediate priority was safety. Jake Patterson, the county's gas well expert, rushed to the site with testing equipment and assistants who treated the area like it might explode. Initial pressure readings and flow rates suggested something extraordinary, not just a small gas pocket, but a substantial reserve that could extend well beyond their property boundaries. But their moment of potential triumph was overshadowed by crisis. Janet Holbrook from Child Protective Services arrived investigating reports about Emma's living conditions following her pneumonia hospitalization. Janet's inspection of their camping setup was thorough and damning. Inadequate heating, no running water, no proper sanitation facilities. Her ultimatum was stark: demonstrate significant improvement in Emma's living situation within 30 days or face losing custody of their daughter. 3 days later, Jake Patterson's call would transform their understanding of what they'd accidentally discovered. The laboratory analysis revealed 92% methane, extremely high-quality natural gas. Seismic testing suggested reserves extending 2 miles in each direction, trapped in easily accessible shale formations. Jake's conservative estimate was staggering: approximately $190 million worth of recoverable natural gas lay beneath their 47 acres of desperate purchase. Within days, energy company representatives were navigating the mountain roads to meet with a family who'd gone from homeless to potentially wealthy overnight. Appalachian Energy Corporation, Titan Gas Corporation, and 3 other companies made competing offers ranging from $5 million to $12 million upfront, plus ongoing royalty percentages that could generate income for decades. Frank Morrison's advice proved invaluable during negotiations. Having grown up in coal country, he'd seen families become wealthy overnight and families lose everything to companies better at writing contracts than landowners were at reading them. Pick the company you trust most, not necessarily the one offering the most money up front, he counseled. The Chen family ultimately signed with Appalachian Energy for $8 million up front,
plus 15% royalties with strong environmental protections and community benefit provisions. When Marcus carried the cashier's check to the bank where they'd been struggling to maintain a positive balance, their account was transformed from desperate to secure. Their credit rating jumped from terrible to excellent. The first lumber trucks arrived on a Tuesday morning in late November, carrying Douglas fir beams and cedar siding up the mountain with precious cargo care. The house Marcus and Sarah designed wasn't a mansion. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, an open kitchen and living area for family gatherings and community meetings, solar panels for electricity, geothermal heating powered by their own natural gas, and windows positioned to capture morning sun and views of Emma's fairy kingdom by the creek.
Maya picked up her phone and called Derek. "I need to tell you something," she said when he answered, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. "About the medical bills, about Dad's care, about everything." "Maya, it's late. Can this wait until—" "No," she interrupted. "It can't wait. I'm coming over. There are things you need to know. Things that change everything about how we handle this crisis." Maya ended the call and stood in her tiny apartment, looking around at the props that had supported her performance for so long: the secondhand furniture, the discount store curtains, the careful arrangement of modest possessions that told the story of struggle and limitation. In a few hours, none of it would matter anymore. The broke artist persona that had protected her privacy and preserved her relationships was about to be sacrificed on the altar of family emergency. She gathered her financial statements, her property portfolios, the legal documents that prove the existence of an empire built in shadows and maintained through elaborate deception. The papers felt impossibly heavy in her hands, weighted not just with information, but with the certain knowledge that sharing them would change every relationship that mattered to her. Maya Chen, secret millionaire and professional struggling artist, prepared to step out of the shadows and reveal the truth that would either save her family or destroy the bonds that had motivated every choice she'd made. The woman who owned 12 properties worth $45 million was about to risk everything that mattered to save the people who had unknowingly inspired her success. As she locked her apartment door behind her, Maya realized that the real crisis wasn't her father's heart attack or the medical bills that threatened her family's stability. The real crisis was the life she'd built around deception, the love she'd hidden behind performance, the success she'd achieved in isolation from the people who should have been celebrating it with her. The night air felt different against her skin as she walked toward the confrontation that would define the rest of her life. Behind her lay years of careful construction, elaborate performance, and solitary achievement. Ahead lay truth, with all its terrifying possibilities for both redemption and destruction. The drive to Derek's house felt like a journey to her own execution. Maya sat in the back of another rideshare, clutching a manila folder that contained the architectural blueprints of her secret empire: bank statements, property deeds, tax documents, investment portfolios, a paper trail that would either liberate her family or obliterate every relationship she'd spent years carefully nurturing. The folder felt impossibly heavy in her lap, weighted with the certain knowledge that the woman who arrived at Derek's door would be fundamentally different from the one that left. Maya had texted the family group chat during the ride. "Emergency family meeting at Derek's. Everyone needs to be there. It's about Dad's medical bills and other things." The responses had come quickly. Sarah would drive over from her apartment. Their parents would come as soon as their father felt strong enough for the short trip from the hospital. Jennifer was putting the kids to bed early. They all assumed Maya was planning to contribute her meager savings to the family crisis, perhaps a few $100s scraped together from her art supply budget. None of them could have imagined that she was preparing to reveal ownership of more wealth than all of them would earn in several lifetimes combined. Derek's living room had been hastily arranged for the family meeting, chairs pulled in from the dining room to create a circle that reminded Maya uncomfortably of an intervention. The lighting was warm and domestic, table lamps casting gentle shadows that would have been cozy under different circumstances. Now it felt like a stage set for a confession that would detonate every assumption her family had made about her life. Maya arrived first. Using her key, Derek had insisted she keep one, another gesture of family solidarity.
that now felt like evidence of how completely she'd deceived them. She sat on the familiar couch where she'd watched countless football games and holiday movies, where Derek's children had climbed on her lap to hear stories, where she'd performed the role of beloved but impractical aunt for so many years that the performance had become indistinguishable from reality. Her parents arrived next, her father moving slowly but steadily, the hospital bracelet still circling his wrist like a reminder of how quickly life could change. Her mother hovered beside him with the protective instincts of someone who had nearly lost everything that mattered, helping him settle into Derek's recliner with the careful attention usually reserved for something precious and fragile. "You look tired, sweetheart," her mother said to Maya, settling beside her on the couch. "I know this has been stressful for all of us, but don't worry too much about the money situation. We'll figure something out. We always do."
The words hit Maya like physical blows, each one a reminder of how completely her family had accepted her supposed poverty, how thoroughly they'd incorporated her struggle into their understanding of family dynamics. Her mother was comforting her about financial stress, while Maya owned properties worth more than most people saw in a lifetime. Sarah arrived with the efficient energy of someone who had spent the day researching medical payment plans and insurance appeals. She carried a notebook filled with calculations and options, her lawyer's training evident in the organized approach she brought to crisis management. "I've been looking into hardship programs," she announced, settling into a dining room chair. "The hospital has some options for families facing financial difficulties." Derek and Jennifer completed the circle, Derek settling beside Maya with the weary satisfaction of someone who had spent the day calling banks about loan options. "I talked to 3 different lenders today," he said. "The home equity line of credit looks like our best option. The interest rates aren't great, but it's the fastest way to access the money we need." Maya looked around the circle at faces marked by exhaustion and worry, at people she loved preparing to sacrifice their financial futures to solve a problem she could eliminate with a phone call. The weight of her deception had never felt heavier, but neither had the potential consequences of revelation. She was about to change everything, not just for herself, but for every person in this room. "Before we talk about loans or payment plans," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt, "there's something I need to tell all of you, something that changes everything about our situation." She reached for the manila folder, her hands trembling slightly as she opened it. "I haven't been completely honest about my financial situation." The room fell silent, family members exchanging glances that mixed confusion with concern. Maya knew they were imagining credit card debt, unpaid bills, additional financial problems that would complicate an already difficult situation. "Maya, whatever it is, we can handle it," Derek said gently. "If you've got debt or something, we'll figure that out too. Family sticks together." Maya pulled out the first document, a bank statement showing her primary checking account balance, $847,000. She placed it on the coffee table in the center of their circle, the numbers clearly visible under Derek's table lamp. "This is my checking account," she said quietly. "My everyday spending money." The silence that followed was so complete, Maya could hear the hum of Derek's refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant sound of his children's voices upstairs, the tick of the wall clock that suddenly seemed impossibly loud. Her family stared at the bank statement as if it were written in a foreign language, their minds struggling to process information that contradicted everything they thought they knew. "I don't understand," her mother said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. This says you have almost $1 million?" She looked up at Maya with confusion and something that might have been fear. "Honey, whose bank statement is this?" "It's mine," Maya said, pulling out additional documents, investment portfolios, property deeds, tax returns that showed annual income in the 7 figures. "All of these are mine. I own 12 properties across 6 states. My net worth is approximately $45 million. The words seemed to hang in the air like smoke, visible and impossible to ignore, but somehow unreal. Maya watched her family process the information, their faces cycling through disbelief, confusion, and something approaching horror as the implications began to sink in. Derek picked up one of the property deeds, the Chicago penthouse, and read it slowly, his lips moving silently as he absorbed the details. "This says you bought this place for $3.2 million, he said, his voice hollow with shock. 3 years ago. "Yes, I bought it with cash from the sale of my first investment property in Boston."
Sarah was flipping through the investment portfolio, her lawyer's eyes scanning numbers that told a story of sophisticated financial planning and enormous wealth accumulation. Maya, these returns? You're making more in a quarter than I make in a year. She looked up, her face pale with realization. How long has this been going on?
6 years, Maya said, since right after college. I bought my first rental property with money I saved working 3 jobs, and it grew from there. The room erupted into overlapping voices, questions and accusations and expressions of disbelief that created a cacophony of family crisis. Her father's voice cut through the noise, quiet, but carrying the authority of the family patriarch. Stop. Everyone just stop talking for a minute. The silence returned, heavy with tension and betrayal. Maya's father leaned forward in his recliner, studying his youngest daughter with eyes that held disappointment so profound it felt like a physical weight on her chest. "You've been lying to us for 6 years," he said, each word measured and deliberate. "While we worried about your future, while we stayed awake at night wondering how you were paying rent, while we offered you money and help and advice, you were sitting on $45 million. Dad, it's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple," Derek interrupted, his voice rising with anger and hurt. "Do you have any idea what I went through today? I called banks, I looked into cashing out my 401k, I offered to let you move in with my family because I thought you were struggling." He stood up, pacing to the window with the restless energy of someone whose entire understanding of reality had just collapsed. "I was going to mortgage my house to help pay for Dad's medical bills while you could have just written a check." Maya felt tears beginning to gather in her eyes, but she forced herself to continue. "I wanted to help. I've been trying to figure out how to help without revealing everything. The way my assets are structured, it's complicated to access large amounts quickly without what?" Sarah demanded, her voice sharp with legal precision. "Without admitting that you've been lying to your family for years? Without acknowledging that you let us worry and struggle while you accumulated more wealth than most people can imagine?" "I never meant for it to go this far," Maya said, her voice breaking slightly. "In the beginning, I just wanted privacy. I wanted to build something without everyone having opinions about my choices, without the pressure and expectations that come with money." "So you decided to let us think you were failing instead?" Jennifer spoke for the first time since the revelations began, her voice quiet but edged with hurt. "Maya, do you know how many times Derek has lost sleep worrying about you? How many conversations have we had about how to help you without damaging your pride?" The accusation hit Maya like a physical blow, forcing her to confront the unintended consequences of her elaborate deception. She'd protected her privacy and preserved her autonomy, but she'd done so by letting the people who loved her most carry unnecessary worry and guilt. Maya's mother picked up another document, the deed to the Vermont farmhouse, and studied it with the careful attention of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "This property, it's beautiful. I remember you showed us pictures once, said you were house-sitting for a friend." Her voice carried a hurt so deep it made Maya's chest ache. "You owned it. You owned it and you lied to us about it." "I wanted to share it with you," Maya said desperately. "I've imagined so many times bringing all of you there, having family gatherings in that house, but I didn't know how to explain without revealing everything else." "By telling us the truth," her father said simply. "By trusting your family with the truth." Derek returned to his seat, but his posture remained rigid with anger and betrayal. "I can't get past the timing of all this. You're revealing this now, when Dad's in the hospital and we're facing a financial crisis? Were you just going to let us destroy our savings and mortgage our futures while you sat on this fortune?" "No," Maya said quickly. "I was trying to find a way to help without admitting you'd been lying to us," Sarah finished. "Maya, do you realize how this looks? You kept the secret through every family crisis, every time one of us struggled with money, every time we offered to help you thinking you needed it."
Maya remembered Christmas 3 years ago when Derek had quietly slipped her an envelope with $500, telling her to use it for art supplies or groceries, whatever she needed most. She'd kept the money rather than hurt his feelings by returning it, but she'd donated $10,000 to the children's hospital that week in Derek's name, unable to bear the weight of his generosity.
I donated money in all your names, Maya said, pulling out charitable giving records from the folder. Every time someone helped me, I tried to pay it forward. When Derek gave me money for Christmas, I donated 20 times that amount to charity. When Sarah helped me with my taxes, I funded scholarships for law students who couldn't afford school. That's not the point, her mother said, her voice heavy with disappointment. The point is trust, Maya. The point is family. We don't want your charity. We want your honesty. The word charity stung because it captured exactly what Maya had been doing, performing philanthropy instead of participating in authentic relationships. She'd given money away in their names, but she'd withheld the truth that would have allowed them to make their own choices about their own struggles. Maya's father leaned back in his recliner, looking suddenly older than his years. I keep thinking about all the times I worried about you, he said quietly. All the conversations with your mother about whether we should offer to help with rent, whether we should be more direct about encouraging you to find stable work. He shook his head slowly. You let us carry that worry, that guilt about not being able to provide better for our children, while you had more money than we could imagine? I never wanted you to worry, Maya said, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. Everything I did was to protect our relationships, to keep money from changing how we interact with each other. But it did change how we interact, Jennifer observed. It changed everything, Maya. Every family dinner where we talked about your career, every time we offered advice or help, every moment of concern or celebration, all of it was based on a lie. Sarah was reviewing the tax documents with professional thoroughness, her face growing more troubled as she absorbed the full scope of Maya's financial empire. These charitable donations, she said. Maya, you've given away millions of dollars to art programs, scholarships, medical research, disaster relief. She looked up with something approaching awe. You've been running a private foundation. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted the money to mean something beyond just accumulating wealth. But you couldn't trust us to understand that? Derek asked. You couldn't let us be part of something that is important to you? The question revealed the deepest wound of all. Not just that Maya had hidden her wealth, but that she'd excluded her family from the meaningful work that wealth had enabled. She'd built schools and funded scholarships and supported causes they all cared about. But she'd done it in isolation, denying them the chance to participate in something larger than themselves. I was protecting you, Maya said weakly, knowing even as she spoke that the explanation was inadequate. From what? Her father demanded. From being proud of our daughter? From celebrating your success? From being part of your life? From having your relationships with me change because of money? From having every interaction filtered through questions about loans or investments or whether I was going to judge your financial choices? Derek stood up again, this time moving to the mantelpiece where family photos told the story of their shared history. Birthday parties and graduations, holidays and achievements, moments of joy that Maya had participated in while hiding the most significant aspect of her life. Maya, look at these pictures. Look at this family. Do you really think we're the kind of people who would have treated you differently because you were successful? Maya studied the photographs, seeing her own face smiling back from dozens of family moments, and realized that her assumptions about her family's potential reactions had been based more on her own fears than on their actual character. She'd projected her anxieties about wealth and relationships onto people who had never given her reason to doubt their love or integrity. I was wrong, Maya said simply. I was scared and I was wrong and I hurt all of you by not trusting you with the truth.
Her mother set down the property deed she'd been studying and moved to sit beside Maya on the couch. For a moment, Maya thought she might receive comfort, forgiveness, some gesture of maternal understanding. Instead, her mother took her hands and looked into her eyes with a profound expression of sadness.
Maya, we love you no matter what, she said. Rich or poor, successful or struggling, we love you because you're our daughter. But love requires trust, and you broke that trust. You let us worry and sacrifice and struggle while you had every resource to help. More than that, you denied us the chance to share in your success, to be proud of what you'd accomplished. I know, Maya whispered. I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix 6 years of deception, Derek said, though his voice had lost some of its angry edge. Sorry doesn't undo the nights I lay awake worrying about your future, or the conversations where we all tried to figure out how to help someone who didn't need help. Sarah closed the financial documents and leaned back in her chair, her lawyer's mind clearly working through the implications and complexities of the situation. Maya, I need to understand something, she said. Why now? Why are you telling us this now, in the middle of Dad's medical crisis? It was the question Maya had been dreading, because it exposed the self-serving nature of her timing. She wasn't revealing the truth because she'd found the courage to be honest. She was revealing it because circumstances had forced her hand. Because the alternative was watching her family sacrifice their financial stability for a crisis she could easily solve. Because I couldn't watch you all destroy your savings and mortgage your futures when I could prevent it, Maya said. Because keeping the secret was starting to cost more than revealing it. So you're not telling us because you trust us or because you want us to be part of your life, Derek said with bitter understanding. You're telling us because you need us to know so you can fix Dad's medical situation without looking like a hero who suddenly came into money. The accusation was accurate and devastating, forcing Maya to confront the selfishness that had motivated even her moment of supposed honesty. She wasn't having this conversation because she learned to value authentic relationships over privacy. She was having it because her deception had become inconvenient. That's part of it, Maya admitted. But it's not all of it. I've been thinking about telling you for months. The medical crisis just made it impossible to wait any longer. Maya's father, who had been silent during this exchange, spoke with the quiet authority that had guided their family through previous crises. Maya, we need some time to process all of this. The money situation for my medical care, we'll figure that out as a family, with full information this time. But the relationship situation, the trust situation, that's going to take longer to resolve. Maya nodded, understanding that forgiveness would be a process rather than a single moment of reconciliation. She'd shattered something fundamental in their relationships, and rebuilding would require more than explanations or apologies. I want to make it right, Maya said. However long it takes, whatever it requires, I want to repair what I've broken. That starts with truth, complete truth, not just the parts that are convenient to share. If we're going to rebuild trust, we need to understand everything. How you built this wealth, why you made the choices you made, what your life has really been like all these years. Maya took a deep breath, realizing that this conversation was just the beginning of a much longer process of revelation and reconciliation. She'd opened the door to honesty, but walking through it would require courage she wasn't sure she possessed. Okay, Maya said. Let me start from the beginning. Let me tell you about the real Maya Chen and how she built an empire while everyone thought she was failing. The family settled in for a long night of truth-telling, their relationships forever changed by revelations that would either destroy the bonds between them or forge something stronger than what had come before. Maya began to speak, her words finally carrying the weight of complete honesty.
and discovered that the truth was both frightening and more liberating than any performance she'd ever maintained.
The morning after the revelation dawned gray and uncertain, autumn sunlight filtering through Maya's apartment windows with the tentative quality of light that doesn't quite know where it belongs. She sat at her small kitchen table, surrounded by financial documents that had been hastily gathered the night before, each paper a piece of evidence in the case against the woman she'd pretended to be for 6 years. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from various family members, text messages that ranged from requests for clarification to expressions of hurt so profound they made her chest ache. Maya had barely slept, her mind replaying every moment of the previous evening's confrontation, every word that had cut through the careful architecture of her double life like a blade through tissue paper. The silence in her tiny apartment felt different now, not the comfortable solitude of someone choosing privacy, but the hollow emptiness of someone who had lost the right to perform simplicity. Her disguise had been stripped away, and with it, the identity that had protected her from the complications of wealth and family expectations. The first call she made was to her financial advisor, Marcus, whose voice carried the smooth professionalism of someone accustomed to managing the complex affairs of high-net-worth clients. "Maya, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. Given your family's medical emergency, I've identified several properties we could liquidate quickly with minimal tax implications. The Miami condo, for instance, has appreciated significantly and could close within 2 weeks." Maya stared out her window at the ordinary neighborhood where she'd performed poverty for so long, understanding that she would never again be able to walk these streets as the struggling artist who belonged here. "Marcus, I need you to do something different. I need you to transfer $2 million to a family trust, something that can handle my father's medical expenses and provide support for my siblings without making it look like charity." "Of course," Marcus replied, already shifting into problem-solving mode. "We can structure it as an emergency family assistance fund, perfectly legal and tax-efficient. Should I coordinate with your family's financial advisors?" Maya almost laughed at the suggestion. Derek's financial advisor was a part-time insurance agent who helped him with his modest 401k contributions. Sarah handled her own finances with the methodical precision of someone who had never had enough money to require professional management. Her parents kept their savings in a checking account at the local credit union, their financial planning limited to ensuring they could cover monthly expenses and maybe take a modest vacation each year. "They don't have financial advisors," Maya said. "They're regular people with regular jobs who manage their own money because they've never had enough to make it complicated." The conversation with Marcus highlighted one of the many chasms that would need to be bridged in the coming months. Maya had spent years learning to navigate the complex world of high-net-worth financial planning, tax optimization, and investment strategy. Her family lived in a simpler universe where financial decisions were straightforward because options were limited. Bringing them into her world would require not just revelation, but education. Not just honesty, but translation. Maya's second call was to her property manager, a conversation that felt like discussing the logistics of dismantling her secret identity. "I need to make some changes to how we handle the properties," she explained. "My family situation has evolved, and I may be bringing them more directly into the business." "Understood," came the professional response. "Should we schedule a comprehensive review meeting? We can present the portfolio in a format suitable for family discussion, prepare documentation that explains the investment strategy and performance history." Each conversation reinforced the surreal nature of Maya's new reality. She was planning family meetings that would include discussions of multi-million-dollar real estate portfolios and charitable foundations, conversations that would take place between people who had worried about her ability to pay rent just days before. By noon, Maya had received text messages from each family member requesting individual meetings before they attempted any group discussions. The message from Derek was characteristically direct. "I need to understand how this happened. Can we meet this afternoon? Just us." Sarah's text carried her lawyer's precision. "I'd like to review the financial documents more thoroughly and discuss the legal implications of the family trust you mentioned." Her parents' message was signed by both of them, formal in a way that broke Maya's heart. "We would like to see you today to continue our conversation from last evening. We have questions that need answers."
Maya chose to meet with her parents first, understanding that their approval and forgiveness would be essential for any hope of family reconciliation. She drove to their house in the same rideshare she'd used for years,
clutching a briefcase that contained detailed explanations of her investment strategy, copies of charitable donations made in their names, and photographs of properties they'd never known she owned. The familiar suburban neighborhood looked different through the lens of revelation. Not like the stable, middle-class community where her parents had built their lives, but like a place that represented everything she'd pretended to aspire to while secretly surpassing. Her mother answered the door with the careful politeness reserved for difficult conversations, the kind of formal courtesy that indicated emotional distance even within family relationships. "Come in, sweetheart. Your father's in the living room. We've been talking since early this morning, trying to make sense of everything." Maya found her father in his favorite chair, the same spot where he'd sat during countless family discussions over the years, but his posture carried a weariness that went beyond his recent medical crisis. The coffee table had been cleared except for a notepad where he'd apparently been writing questions, his methodical approach to problem-solving evident even in family crises. "Sit down, Maya," he said, his voice carrying none of its usual warmth. "We need to understand some things, and we need you to be completely honest this time." Maya settled onto the couch where she'd performed the role of struggling artist daughter so many times, where she'd accepted advice about job hunting and career stability while secretly managing a fortune that exceeded their comprehension. "I'll answer anything you want to know," she said. "No more secrets, no more lies." Her father consulted his notepad, approaching the conversation with the systematic thoroughness that had made him successful in his manufacturing career. "Let's start with the beginning. You said this started 6 years ago, right after college. Walk us through how a young woman working 3 jobs managed to buy her first rental property." Maya took a deep breath, preparing to reveal not just the mechanics of her success, but the mindset that had driven every decision. "I was working at the coffee shop, the bookstore, and doing freelance graphic design. I was living in a studio apartment that cost $800 a month, eating ramen noodles, wearing clothes from thrift stores. But I wasn't doing it because I had to. I was doing it because I wanted to save every possible dollar for investment." "Investment in what?" her mother asked, settling beside her father with the careful attention of someone preparing to judge not just information, but character. "Real estate," Maya replied. "I'd been reading about property investment, studying market trends, learning about cash flow and appreciation. I saved $32,000 in 18 months, enough for a down payment on a small duplex in a neighborhood that was just beginning to gentrify." Maya pulled out photographs of her first property, a modest 2-family house that looked nothing like the luxury properties she now owned. "The duplex cost $140,000. I lived in one unit and rented out the other, so the rental income covered most of my mortgage payment. Within 2 years, the neighborhood had improved enough that the property was worth $190,000. "So you sold it?" her father asked, making notes with the careful attention of someone trying to understand a foreign language. "I refinanced it," Maya explained. "I pulled out my original investment plus some of the appreciation, which gave me enough money to buy a second property. Then I repeated the process. Each property generated rental income and appreciated in value, and I used that equity to buy more properties." Her mother was studying the photographs, her face reflecting the struggle to reconcile these images with the daughter she thought she knew. "Maya, this house looks lovely. Why didn't you tell us you owned it? Why let us think you were struggling?" The question struck at the heart of Maya's deception, forcing her to confront motivations that seemed logical in isolation, but appeared harmful and selfish in the light of family scrutiny. "Because I knew you'd have opinions about it," Maya said. "I knew you'd worry about the debt, question whether I was taking too much risk, suggest that I focus on more traditional career paths."
"So you decided our opinions didn't matter?" her father asked, his voice carrying disappointment that cut deeper than anger ever could. "I decided I wanted to prove myself before having to defend my choices," Maya replied. "I wanted to build something significant enough that the results would speak for themselves." "But the results never spoke for themselves," her mother observed. "Because you never let us see the results. You built this empire in secret, kept us in the dark about the most important aspects of your life."
Maya pulled out additional documents, spreading them across the coffee table like evidence in a trial where she was simultaneously prosecutor, defendant, and judge. Property deeds, investment statements, tax returns that showed the exponential growth of her wealth over 6 years. "Look at this," she said, pointing to her tax return from the previous year. "I made $2.3 million in rental income alone, plus capital gains from property sales. But I was still living in that tiny apartment, still wearing thrift store clothes, still letting you worry about my financial stability." Her father studied the tax return, his manufacturing worker's understanding of money struggling to process numbers that represented more annual income than he'd earned in his entire career. "Maya, this is more money than most people see in a lifetime. Why continue pretending to struggle when you had achieved this level of success?" "Because I didn't know how to stop," I admitted, the words carrying the weight of recognition she'd been avoiding for months. "The performance became a habit, then a trap. Every family dinner where you worried about my future, every conversation where you offered help. I wanted to tell you the truth, but I didn't know how to explain why I'd hidden it in the first place." "You could have started with, 'I've been lying to you,'" her mother said, her voice sharp with hurt. "You could have trusted us to understand, to be happy for your success, instead of assuming we'd somehow punish you for it." Maya felt tears beginning to gather, understanding that the real tragedy wasn't her deception, but the assumptions about her family's character that had made the deception seem necessary. "I was protecting something that didn't need protection. I was solving problems that didn't exist while creating problems that are much worse." Her father set down the tax return and looked at his daughter with eyes that held disappointment and something that might have been pity. "Maya, we raised you to understand the value of honesty, of family, of sharing both struggles and successes with the people who love you. Somewhere along the way, you forgot those lessons." "I never forgot them," Maya protested. "I just thought I could honor them later, after I'd built something worth sharing." "Everything was worth sharing," her mother said firmly. "Your first property purchase, your investment strategy, your growing success. All of it was worth sharing because it was your life, and we wanted to be part of your life." Maya pulled out copies of her charitable giving records, documents that showed millions of dollars donated to causes her family cared about: education, healthcare, veterans services, environmental protection. "I tried to include you in the meaningful parts," she said. "Look at these donations. I gave money in all of your names, supported causes I knew you'd approve of." Her father reviewed the charitable contributions, his expression softening slightly as he recognized organizations they'd discussed supporting over the years, causes they'd wished they had the resources to help more significantly. "Maya, these donations, you funded entire scholarship programs, supported medical research, helped rebuild communities after natural disasters." "I wanted the money to matter," Maya said. "I wanted to use it to make a difference in ways that would have made you proud." "We would have been proud," her mother said, her voice breaking slightly. "We would have been so proud to see you using your success to help others. But you didn't give us the chance to be proud. You kept it all secret, like you were ashamed of us or didn't trust us to understand." "I was never ashamed of you," Maya said quickly. "I was ashamed of the deception, afraid that revealing it would change everything between us." "It has changed everything between us," her father said quietly. "But not because of your success, because of your dishonesty. Money doesn't change family relationships, Maya. Lies do." The afternoon continued with detailed explanations of Maya's investment philosophy, her property management strategies, her plans for using wealth to create positive impact. Her parents listened with the careful attention of people trying to understand not just financial information, but the daughter they thought they knew. Gradually, Maya began to see glimpses of the pride and excitement they might have shown if she'd shared her journey from the beginning. "This Vermont property," her mother said, studying photographs of the restored farmhouse, "it's beautiful. I can see why you fell in love with it." "I bought it thinking about family gatherings," Maya admitted. "Holiday celebrations, summer vacations, a place where we could all be together, away from the complications of ordinary life." We could have been having those gatherings for 3 years, her father observed. Instead of imagining them, we could have been living them.
Because wine suggested disposable income she wasn't supposed to possess. As she cooked, she found herself thinking about the restaurant where she'd taken her property manager to celebrate their latest acquisition, a 5-course tasting menu that had cost more than her family spent on groceries in a month. The memory felt like something that had happened to someone else, a scene from a movie she'd watched rather than a life she'd lived. The complexity of her situation had deepened over time, each new property adding another layer to an identity that was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. She'd started buying real estate as a practical investment strategy, a way to build long-term wealth while pursuing her artistic passions. But somewhere along the way, the properties had become more than investments. They'd become secrets, each one a piece of truth she couldn't share with the people who mattered most to her. Maya ate her simple dinner standing at the kitchen counter, a habit she'd developed that reinforced her image as someone too busy or too careless to set a proper table. Through her single window, she could see into the apartments across the courtyard where other people lived their uncomplicated lives with the lights on and the curtains open. A young couple argued about whose turn it was to do laundry. An elderly man watched television while his cat dozed on his lap. A woman about Maya's age worked at a laptop while her toddler played with blocks on the floor. Their problems were visible and ordinary. Tired parents, unpaid bills, relationship disagreements that could be resolved with conversation and compromise. Maya envied their transparency, their ability to exist without performance or pretense. She'd traded that simplicity for financial security that exceeded her wildest dreams, but the exchange had cost her something she was only beginning to understand. She'd become successful in ways that couldn't be celebrated, wealthy in ways that couldn't be shared, accomplished in ways that looked like failure to everyone who claimed to love her. Her phone rang, displaying her sister Sarah's name and photo, a professional headshot that radiated competence and conventional achievement. Maya let it ring twice before answering, using those moments to shift back into character, to become the version of herself that her family expected. "Hey, how are you doing?" Sarah's voice carried that particular blend of warmth and concern that Maya had come to recognize as her family's default tone when speaking with her. "I wanted to check in after dinner today. Mom seemed pretty worked up about your situation." Maya set down her fork and leaned against the kitchen counter, preparing for a conversation that would require careful navigation. "I'm fine. You know how she gets. She just worries." "We all worry," Sarah said gently. "It's because we care about you. You're talented and smart, and we hate seeing you struggle when you don't have to." There was a pause, the sound of Sarah settling into what Maya recognized as her problem-solving mode. "I've been thinking about what Derek said about the art therapy position. I have some connections at the hospital system. I could make some calls, set up an informational interview." The offer was generous and well-intentioned, and Maya felt the familiar guilt that accompanied every attempt her family made to help her. Sarah would indeed make those calls, would spend her own social capital trying to create opportunities for a sister who didn't need them, would invest time and energy in solving a problem that didn't actually exist. "That's really sweet of you," Maya said, injecting gratitude into her voice while her eyes swept across her apartment, taking inventory of the props that supported her performance. "Let me think about it, okay? I'm not sure I'm ready to give up the art thing yet." "Nobody's asking you to give up art," Sarah replied, and she could hear the slight edge of frustration creeping into her voice. "But you could do both. Stable income plus creative fulfillment. Isn't that better than worrying about rent every month?" Maya almost laughed at the irony. Rent was the last thing she worried about. She owned her building and could live in any of her 12 properties whenever she chose. But Sarah's concern was real, and the love behind it was unmistakable, even if it was based on assumptions that couldn't be corrected without destroying the careful architecture of Maya's double life. "I know you're thinking I'm being stubborn," Maya said, choosing her words carefully. "But sometimes the path that looks hardest from the outside is actually leading somewhere important. Sometimes what looks like a struggle is actually an investment in something bigger."
Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and Maya could almost hear her sister processing the statement, trying to decode what sounded like artistic mysticism, but was actually literal truth. Maya, I love your optimism, I really do. But optimism doesn't pay medical bills or build retirement funds. We're not getting any younger, and the art world is incredibly competitive. What if the big breakthrough never comes? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with assumptions and fears that Maya couldn't address directly. Sarah was imagining a future where her sister reached middle age, still struggling to pay bills, still living in tiny apartments, still depending on family help to navigate financial emergencies. She couldn't know that Maya had already secured not just her own future, but had quietly established trust funds that would ensure her nieces and nephews could attend any college they chose, had set aside money to care for their parents as they aged, had built a safety net that extended far beyond her own needs. What if it already has? Maya asked softly. What if the breakthrough isn't what everyone expects it to look like? What do you mean?
Maya's morning routine had evolved to accommodate both solitude and family, rising early to paint while the house slept, then transitioning into the role of hostess, aunt, daughter, and sister as the day unfolded. This morning's painting session had produced a landscape that captured the view from her easel: rolling hills dotted with wildflowers, the barn that housed Derek's woodworking projects alongside her father's furniture-making experiments, the garden where her mother had established raised beds for vegetables and herbs that supplied their family meals. "Maya, breakfast is ready," Sarah's voice called from the kitchen, where she'd been experimenting with recipes that incorporated produce from their garden. Sarah's relationship with Maya's wealth remained the most complex of all the family dynamics. Her lawyer's mind had easily grasped the financial implications and legal structures, but her sense of fairness struggled with the inequality that Maya's success had created within their family relationships. Maya cleaned her brushes and secured her painting, then joined her family in the farmhouse kitchen that had become the heart of their evolved dynamics. The room buzzed with the comfortable chaos of a large family breakfast, her mother supervising pancake preparation while simultaneously managing her grandson's attempts to help, Derek reading property management reports with the careful attention he'd developed since Maya had invited him to become a formal partner in her real estate empire, Jennifer coordinating schedules for the various family members whose lives had become more intertwined since Maya's revelation. "The Chicago property manager called," Derek said, looking up from the rental reports. "The penthouse tenants want to renew their lease, but they're requesting some upgrades: smart home integration, updated appliances, maybe a wine refrigeration system." Maya poured herself coffee from the pot that had been brewing since dawn, still adjusting to conversations where her family discussed million-dollar properties with the casual ease of people who had learned to navigate wealth without being overwhelmed by it. "What do you think?" she asked, genuinely valuing Derek's opinion. "Is it worth the investment?" Derek had surprised everyone, including himself, with his aptitude for property management and investment analysis. His background in insurance had given him an eye for risk assessment, while his natural pragmatism translated well to evaluating renovation costs against potential rental increases. The upgrades would cost about $40,000, but they're asking for a 3-year lease extension at 12% above market rate. It pays for itself in less than 6 months. "Then let's do it," Maya agreed, still finding it remarkable that she could make such decisions in consultation with her brother, that her empire had become a family enterprise rather than a solitary pursuit. Sarah emerged from the pantry with ingredients for her latest culinary experiment, her approach to cooking reflecting the same methodical precision she brought to legal work. "I've been thinking about the scholarship foundation," she said, settling into the breakfast preparation routine they'd developed over months of family gatherings. "The applications for next year are already coming in, and some of them are just heartbreaking. Kids with incredible talent who can't afford basic art supplies, let alone college tuition." Maya had established the Scholarship Foundation 6 months after her revelation, creating a formal structure for the charitable giving that had been scattered across dozens of organizations. Sarah had taken on the legal management of the foundation, finding purpose in using her skills to maximize the impact of Maya's philanthropy. The work had become a bridge between them, allowing Sarah to participate in Maya's wealth in ways that felt meaningful rather than transactional. "How much should we budget for this year?" Maya asked, assembling ingredients for the green smoothie that had become her morning ritual. "We could double last year's awards and still be conservative," Sarah replied. "But I think we should also consider expanding beyond just tuition assistance.
Some of these kids need support for basic living expenses, art supplies, even transportation to get to interviews or auditions. Their father looked up from where he'd been supervising his grandson's pancake flipping technique. When I was working at the plant, we used to have a fund for employees' kids who needed help with college expenses. Never had enough money to do much, but we tried to help where we could. He paused, spatula in hand, his expression reflecting the ongoing adjustment to his daughter's ability to address problems he'd only been able to touch around the edges. It's something else being able to actually solve these problems instead of just wishing you could.
The comment captured one of the unexpected benefits of Maya's revelation. Her family had gained not just knowledge of her success, but participation in her ability to create positive change. They discovered that involvement in significant philanthropy provided its only rewards, that being able to genuinely help people brought satisfaction that went beyond the financial security Maya's wealth had provided. Jennifer joined the breakfast preparation, managing the controlled chaos of feeding a large family while coordinating various schedules and activities. Speaking of the foundation, I've been working with some of the art teachers at the kids' schools. They're seeing incredible need for basic supplies, paintbrushes, canvases, even paper for sketching. What if we created a program that supplies art classrooms in underserved schools? Maya felt a familiar warmth spreading through her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced when she'd first begun using her wealth for charitable purposes, but amplified by having her family as partners in the endeavor. I love that idea. We could call it the Creative Classroom Initiative or something like that. The Maya Chen Creative Classroom Initiative, her mother suggested, from where she was arranging fresh flowers in a vase, a domestic touch that had transformed the farmhouse from investment property into family home. No, Maya said quickly, just the Creative Classroom Initiative. This is a family foundation, not a personal monument. The conversation continued as they prepared and shared breakfast, their discussions flowing seamlessly between family logistics and business decisions, between personal relationships and philanthropic planning. Maya marveled at how naturally her family had adapted to conversations that involved millions of dollars in complex investment strategies, how they'd learned to navigate wealth without losing the fundamental values that had shaped their relationships. After breakfast, Maya found herself alone with her father on the porch, both of them settling into rocking chairs that he'd crafted in the farmhouse workshop during his previous visit. The morning was warming toward what promised to be a beautiful autumn day, the kind of weather that made Maya grateful for every decision that had led to owning this particular piece of paradise. "I've been thinking," her father said, his voice carrying the contemplative tone that preceded important conversations, "about the night you told us everything, about all the months since then, about how our family has changed." Maya felt a familiar tightening in her chest, the anxiety that still accompanied discussions of her deception and its aftermath. Despite the progress they'd made, despite the forgiveness that had been extended and accepted, she still carried guilt about the years of lies and the pain they had caused. "I know I hurt everyone," Maya said quietly. "I know the trust is still being rebuilt, that some of the damage might never be completely repaired." Her father was quiet for a long moment, rocking gently while watching his grandson and Derek explore the property's hiking trails. The morning was warming toward what promised to be a beautiful autumn day, the kind of weather that made Maya grateful for every decision that had led to owning this particular piece of paradise. "I've been thinking," her father said, his voice carrying the contemplative tone that preceded important conversations, "about the night you told us everything, about all the months since then, about how our family has changed." Maya felt a familiar tightening in her chest, the anxiety that still accompanied discussions of her deception and its aftermath. Despite the progress they'd made, despite the forgiveness that had been extended and accepted, she still carried guilt about the years of lies and the pain they had caused. "I know I hurt everyone," Maya said quietly. "I know the trust is still being rebuilt, that some of the damage might never be completely repaired." Her father was quiet for a long moment, rocking gently while watching his grandson and Derek explore the property's hiking trails. "Maya, I want you to understand something," he said finally. "Yes, you hurt us. Yes, you made choices that caused pain and broke trust, but you also built something extraordinary. And you've shared it with us in ways that have enriched all our lives." Maya looked at her father in surprise, not having expected such a generous interpretation of events that still felt fraught with her own failures and shortcomings.
Look around you, her father continued, gesturing toward the property that had become our family's sanctuary. Look at what's happening inside that house, at the conversations we're having, at the work we're doing together. You created this, Maya. Not just the wealth, but the opportunity for our family to participate in something larger than ourselves. I created the problems too, Maya pointed out. The deception, the years of worry, the broken trust.
You created problems that we've solved together, her father replied. And in solving them, we've become a stronger family than we were before. We know each other better now. We work together on things that matter. We've learned that we can navigate even the most difficult conversations and come out intact on the other side. Maya felt tears beginning to gather, moved by her father's ability to find meaning and growth in experiences that she still viewed primarily through the lens of her own mistakes. "I just wish I'd trusted all of you from the beginning," she said. "I wish I'd shared the journey instead of just the destination." "So do I," her father agreed. "But wishing doesn't change what happened. And what happened brought us here, to this place, to this conversation, to this family that's learned to work together in ways we never imagined before your revelation." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, father and daughter processing the complex emotions that came with forgiveness and growth, with relationships that had been damaged and rebuilt stronger than before. Maya understood that her father's perspective was a gift, a choice to focus on positive outcomes rather than dwelling on painful origins. The morning quiet was interrupted by Derek and his son returning from their hike, both of them excited about discovering a stream that might be suitable for fishing, debating the logistics of organizing a family fishing expedition that would include everyone from Maya's mother, who had never held a fishing rod, to Sarah's teenager, who considered most outdoor activities beneath his sophisticated urban sensibilities. "We should have a family retreat here every few months," Derek suggested, settling onto the porch steps with his son leaning against his knee. "Not just vacations, but working retreats, where we plan the foundation activities, review the property investments, make decisions about future directions." Maya nodded, recognizing the wisdom in formalizing their collaboration rather than letting it develop haphazardly. "We could invite Marcus, my financial advisor, to present investment options. Maybe bring in some representatives from organizations we're considering supporting." "I'd like to learn more about real estate analysis," Jennifer added, having joined them on the porch with coffee for everyone. "Not that I want to quit my job, but I think I could contribute more to the property management decisions if I understood the fundamentals better." Maya felt a profound sense of satisfaction listening to her family discuss taking on larger roles in her business empire. Understanding that their involvement transformed her success from personal achievement into family legacy. She'd built wealth in isolation, but she was learning to steward it in collaboration, creating something that would outlast her individual life and benefit generations of family members she might never meet. Sarah emerged from the house carrying her laptop and the satisfied expression of someone who had solved a complex problem. "I just finished reviewing the legal structure for the foundation expansion," she announced. "We can add the Creative Classroom initiative under the existing framework, and I've identified 3 organizations that could help us identify schools with the greatest need." "How much are we talking about for the first year?" Maya asked, settling into the business discussion that felt as natural as family conversation because it had become both. "About $200,000 to supply 100 classrooms with comprehensive art materials. Ongoing annual costs would be lower because we'd just be replenishing supplies rather than providing initial setup." Maya calculated quickly, understanding that the amount represented less than a month's rental income from her property portfolio, money that could transform educational opportunities for thousands of children. "Let's do it," she said, "and let's plan to expand it if the initial program works well." The conversation continued as family members drifted in and out of the discussion, adding ideas and perspectives that refined their philanthropic planning. Maya's mother suggested partnering with retired teachers who could provide training on incorporating art into other subjects. Derek proposed creating documentation that could help other communities start similar programs. Jennifer offered to coordinate with parent organizations that could provide volunteer support.
By midday, they'd outlined an ambitious expansion of their charitable activities, created preliminary timelines for several new property investments, and established the framework for regular family business retreats that would keep everyone involved in major decisions. Maya looked around at her family, scattered across the porch in comfortable chaos, and realized that this was what she'd been unconsciously seeking all along. Not just financial success, but the ability to share meaningful work with people she loved. The afternoon brought individual conversations that had become routine during family gatherings, one-on-one time that allowed for deeper discussions and ongoing relationship repair. Maya found herself walking the property boundaries with Derek, both of them comfortable with the physical activity that accompanied their most serious conversations. "I've been thinking about leaving my job," Derek said as they paused beside the creek that marked the eastern edge of Maya's land. "Not immediately, but maybe within the next year or two. The property management work is more interesting than insurance, and I think I could contribute more if I could focus on it full-time." Maya had been expecting this conversation for months, recognizing that Derek's involvement in her business empire had awakened interests and capabilities that his insurance job couldn't satisfy. "What does Jennifer think about it?" she asked, understanding that such a decision would affect the entire family.
"She's supportive," Derek replied, "especially since we could structure it so I'm drawing a real salary from the property management work, not just accepting family charity." Maya nodded, appreciating Derek's need to contribute rather than simply receive, understanding that sustainable family business relationships required genuine value creation rather than disguised gifts. "We'd need to formalize the business structure," she said. "Create clear roles and responsibilities, establish performance metrics, maybe even bring in outside investors eventually if we want to expand significantly." "I've been researching property management companies," Derek said, "learning about industry standards, best practices, growth strategies. I think we could build something significant, not just manage your existing properties, but potentially help other investors with their portfolios." Maya felt excitement building as Derek outlined his vision for transforming her personal property empire into a legitimate business that could serve other clients, create jobs, and generate income that didn't depend on her initial wealth. "Let's develop a business plan," she suggested. "Something we can review with Marcus and Sarah, make sure we're thinking about all the legal and financial implications." Their walk continued as they discussed the practical details of Derek's transition from employee to entrepreneur, the conversation ranging from technical property management issues to the family dynamics of working together professionally. Maya found herself marveling at how naturally Derek had embraced the complexities of real estate investment, how his practical intelligence had adapted to analyzing markets and evaluating opportunities. That evening brought the family together for dinner prepared collaboratively, everyone contributing to a meal that combined ingredients from their garden with recipes that had become traditions during their gatherings. The dining room table had been extended to accommodate everyone, the conversation flowing between business planning and family news, between serious discussions and casual banter. "I have an announcement," Sarah said as they were finishing dessert, her voice carrying the formal tone she used for important declarations. "I've been offered a partnership at my firm, but I'm thinking about declining it." The table fell quiet, everyone understanding the significance of such a decision. Sarah had worked toward partnership for years, had made personal and professional sacrifices to achieve the recognition and financial security that partnership represented. "Instead," she continued, "I'd like to propose creating a legal services foundation that could provide pro bono representation for artists, small nonprofit organizations, and creative entrepreneurs who can't afford traditional legal fees." Maya felt her breath catch, understanding that Sarah was proposing to leave her successful legal career to create something that would serve the same communities Maya's scholarship foundation supported. "I'd still practice law," Sarah explained, "but I'd be serving people who really need help rather than just helping corporations avoid taxes or navigate regulatory compliance.
The foundation could be funded initially through Maya's wealth, but eventually it could become self-sustaining through grants and donations from other sources. Maya looked around the table at family members, processing Sarah's proposal, understanding that her sister was offering to join her in the work of using wealth for social good, to make the foundation of their family business not just property investment, but service to others. Sarah, that's beautiful. But are you sure? Partnership means financial security, professional recognition, everything you've worked toward. Partnership means more of what I'm already doing, helping wealthy clients preserve and expand their wealth while people who really need legal help can't afford it. I've learned, working with the Scholarship Foundation, that using my skills to help people who need it provides a satisfaction that corporate law never could. The conversation that followed was simultaneously practical and philosophical, covering the logistics of establishing a legal services foundation while exploring the deeper questions of purpose and meaning that wealth had forced all of them to consider. Maya realized that her revelation had initiated changes that extended far beyond her own life, that her family members were using the security her wealth provided to take risks and pursue purposes they might never have considered otherwise. By the time the evening wound down, they'd outlined preliminary plans for Derek's property management company, Sarah's Legal Services Foundation, and expanded programming for Maya's educational initiatives. They'd scheduled monthly family business meetings, established protocols for major decision-making, and created frameworks for accountability that would ensure their various enterprises served their intended purposes rather than simply consuming resources. Maya stood on the porch once more as her family prepared for bed, looking out over property that had transformed from personal retreat to family headquarters, from investment to legacy. She thought about the woman she'd been 18 months ago, trapped in the prison of her own deception, isolated by wealth that she couldn't share with the people she loved most.
Maya picked up her phone and called Derek. "I need to tell you something," she said when he answered, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. "About the medical bills, about Dad's care, about everything." "Maya, it's late. Can this wait until—" "No," she interrupted. "It can't wait. I'm coming over. There are things you need to know, things that change everything about how we handle this crisis." Maya ended the call and stood in her tiny apartment, looking around at the props that had supported her performance for so long: the secondhand furniture, the discount store curtains, the careful arrangement of modest possessions that told the story of struggle and limitation. In a few hours, none of it would matter anymore. The broke artist persona that had protected her privacy and preserved her relationships was about to be sacrificed on the altar of family emergency. She gathered her financial statements, her property portfolios, the legal documents that prove the existence of an empire built in shadows and maintained through elaborate deception. The papers felt impossibly heavy in her hands, weighted not just with information, but with the certain knowledge that sharing them would change every relationship that mattered to her. Maya Chen, secret millionaire and professional struggling artist, prepared to step out of the shadows and reveal the truth that would either save her family or destroy the bonds that had motivated every choice she'd made. The woman who owned 12 properties worth $45 million was about to risk everything that mattered to save the people who had unknowingly inspired her success. As she locked her apartment door behind her, Maya realized that the real crisis wasn't her father's heart attack or the medical bills that threatened her family's stability. The real crisis was the life she'd built around deception, the love she'd hidden behind performance, the success she'd achieved in isolation from the people who should have been celebrating it with her. The night air felt different against her skin as she walked toward the confrontation that would define the rest of her life. Behind her lay years of careful construction, elaborate performance, and solitary achievement. Ahead lay truth, with all its terrifying possibilities for both redemption and destruction. The drive to Derek's house felt like a journey to her own execution. Maya sat in the back of another rideshare, clutching a manila folder that contained the architectural blueprints of her secret empire: bank statements, property deeds, tax documents, investment portfolios,
a paper trail that would either liberate her family or obliterate every relationship she'd spent years carefully nurturing. The folder felt impossibly heavy in her lap, weighted with the certain knowledge that the woman who arrived at Derek's door would be fundamentally different from the one that left. Maya had texted the family group chat during the ride. Emergency family meeting at Derek's. Everyone needs to be there. It's about Dad's medical bills and other things. The responses had come quickly. Sarah would drive over from her apartment. Their parents would come as soon as their father felt strong enough for the short trip from the hospital. Jennifer was putting the kids to bed early. They all assumed Maya was planning to contribute her meager savings to the family crisis, perhaps a few $100s scraped together from her art supply budget. None of them could have imagined that she was preparing to reveal ownership of more wealth than all of them would earn in several lifetimes combined. Derek's living room had been hastily arranged for the family meeting, chairs pulled in from the dining room to create a circle that reminded Maya uncomfortably of an intervention. The lighting was warm and domestic, table lamps casting gentle shadows that would have been cozy under different circumstances. Now it felt like a stage set for a confession that would detonate every assumption her family had made about her life. Maya arrived first. Using her key, Derek had insisted she keep one, another gesture of family solidarity, that now felt like evidence of how completely she'd deceived them. She sat on the familiar couch where she'd watched countless football games and holiday movies, where Derek's children had climbed on her lap to hear stories, where she'd performed the role of beloved but impractical aunt for so many years that the performance had become indistinguishable from reality. Her parents arrived next, her father moving slowly but steadily, the hospital bracelet still circling his wrist like a reminder of how quickly life could change. Her mother hovered beside him with the protective instincts of someone who had nearly lost everything that mattered, helping him settle into Derek's recliner with the careful attention usually reserved for something precious and fragile. "You look tired, sweetheart," her mother said to Maya, settling beside her on the couch. "I know this has been stressful for all of us, but don't worry too much about the money situation. We'll figure something out. We always do."